Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome and thank you for, I know it's really busy at the moment, so I'm really grateful that you've decided to come and support this seminar. This seminar is going to be a bit of a catch-all seminar, so I'm going to, what I want to do is to raise some awareness of the urban refugee and asylum seeker issue in Thailand, and so that we learn more about that. Also, I want to talk through my research process and the research that I'm doing to give you some insight into what I'm doing when I'm locked away in my office and I'm not teaching. Normally, I'll be working on this or writing or something. And also, if we have time, maybe we'll get to do some collaborative analysis together as a group. So how many of you are familiar with qualitative research? How many? Yeah? Have some kind of association, familiarity, or may have dabbled in it before? Yeah, I see tentative hands, half hands going up. Okay, all right, okay. All right, okay, that's good, that's good. So yeah, and also this seminar is not just about me telling you everything. I'm not an expert on refugee issues. I'm not an expert on urban refugees. I'm learning, and I'm not necessarily, an expert knowing everything about qualitative research. So sometimes it's good to share research because it helps to consolidate your thoughts. And sometimes you can get good ideas coming from other people as well who can look at your data and enlighten you to certain things. So I'm also hoping to learn as well as to, do this presentation. So maybe my first slide got lost. It just had the title on it. But that's okay. We'll start here. Maybe we need to start by enlightening ourselves to who are refugees in the first place. So we're going to start quite wide, looking at refugees, and then we'll narrow down to the topic that I'm dealing with. So, according to the Refugee Convention and the other appended articles, a refugee is somebody who is outside his or her country of nationality or habitual residence, has a well-founded fear of being persecuted because of some attribute, some characteristic like race, religion, nationality, is a membership of, or if they are a member of a particular social group or political opinion, and is unable or unwilling to avail him or herself of the protection of that country or return there for fear of persecution. So sometimes there are protective mechanisms. You say, okay, well, there's a police force there. What's wrong with the police force there? There are law enforcers there. Why can't they just stay there and get the protection of their own law enforcers? But in some cases, these people still will be in danger, even though there is a law enforcers and there are police and so on in their own country. They still are not protected by those systems that are in place. So in those situations, the individual may find that they need to flee that country and try and find residence elsewhere or safety elsewhere. And the whole idea of the convention is that the country to which that individual goes to will then take up like a surrogate role. Because they can't get protection where they were, that country would take up like a surrogate role in protecting those individuals. However, the situation becomes complicated when you have countries who have not signed the Refugee Convention, and there are for one or the other reason have not ratified, we say. They have confirmed that they are willing to comply with the articles in the Refugee Convention. In those cases, those countries are not obligated to protect the refugees that come within their borders. So the situation gets quite complicated. And in those situations, the national laws and policies and stances then overtake the international articles in the Refugee Convention. The Refugee Convention is international, but individual countries have their own laws and policies and ways of dealing with refugees and asylum seekers. So that it becomes quite complex. Just in case, I don't know if all of you know, Thailand has not ratified the United Nations Convention for refugees. So the situation is quite complicated, which is one of the reasons why I wanted to conduct this research. The complications of the environment means that it is important, yes, and interesting to look at these issues within this particular political context. Yeah. Which way am I going? Okay, so Thailand's refugee and asylum seeker population, at the moment, there are 97,000 refugees in Thailand. Most of them live in the camps along the Thai-Myanmar border. And I'm sure we've heard of those. They are there on the map there. And some of us may have even gone to visit Mesot, for instance. So most of the refugees in Thailand live on that border. However, there are approximately 5,000, and that number may have grown by now, refugees and asylum seekers that are living in Bangkok. And normally, the refugees and asylum seekers we hear about are in the camps. But there are those who live in urban areas. Now, we might think, and again, this is an area that's not very well, they remain almost invisible because not many people talk about them. We focus, when we see the pictures on the news and so on, it's all about the refugees in the camp. But there are refugees living in urban areas all around the world. And in Bangkok, we might think to ourselves, well, we see the refugees in the camps and they're just, trapped in this space. It's like prison, and they don't have much freedom. And we may, in comparison, look at refugees in urban areas and think, oh, they're out in the open, they have more freedom. But actually, they are entrapped. Their walls and the bars of their entrapment are invisible. But they are just as much, if not maybe more so, trapped and imprisoned as those, and limited and immobilized as those who live in the camps. And actually, because there's been such a big increase in urban refugees and asylum seekers, it's caused political bodies around the world to kind of start paying more attention. Now you'll see more literature being produced about urban refugees and asylum seekers. So it is an issue that hasn't been very well investigated, but the literature and the attention that's being paid to urban refugees and asylum seekers is increasing. Now you realize that I use the term urban refugees and asylum seekers. Okay, this is not a term that you'll necessarily find in the literature. I don't know if I've coined it. I haven't, maybe I have, I don't know. But I realized that, we use the word refugees, and oftentimes the word refugee is used to encompass everyone. But the reality is that there are those who have refugee status and those who don't. There are those who are waiting for refugee status. There are those who have been rejected and are appealing, in the process of appealing. So I wanted to capture all of those individuals. So Refugees are those who have been given official refugee status from the UN, and asylum seekers I am classing in my research as everyone else who has fled, who has been displaced from their country of origin or country of abode and are seeking refuge. So that could be people who have applied and been rejected and are appealing, are in the midst of an appeal, or it could be people who have applied, been rejected, applied again, been rejected, applied again, then their case has been closed. Okay? There are many people in that situation that I spoke to in my research who are what we call case closed individuals who have no means of appeal but no means of returning home because they will be killed. And I'll tell you about that in a second. So urban refugees and asylum seekers live in urban areas. 60% of global refugee population live in urban areas globally. And the urban refugees in Thailand come from these countries. Iraq, Iran, Pakistan, which is one of the largest groups, Palestine, Somalia, Sri Lanka, Sudan, Syria, and also Vietnam, mainly. There are other countries as well. So what are the challenges faced by urban refugees and asylum seekers? Levels of insecurity, immobility, unable to move from where they are to other places or other countries because they're waiting to be accepted by a third country. Lack of access to safe spaces because, of course, lack of financial resources means they have to live in the poorest areas, the most deprived areas. Marginalization. And this is a very important one, marginalization. Being rejected by the native population. This is a very common experience of refugees and asylum seekers. And it's been made, I think it's made worse by negative media images and portrayals of people infiltrating the country, sapping resources, being deceptive, coming from questionable places, being violent, these different looking people who invade these societies. This is how refugees and asylum seekers are often looked upon. And that's not just in Thailand, everywhere. You find it in the UK, you find it in the States. We all know that these discourses exist. So in that way, they are disadvantaged on multiple levels. They've already come from trauma. They've already come from marginalization. And then they face it again in the country of refuge, where they're seeking help. So they are disadvantaged on multiple levels. And also, the other thing I want to say about marginalization is that it is their very outward appearance that marginalizes them. Imagine trying to run away from your outward appearance. It is because Pakistani refugees look Pakistani that they are marginalized, that they are isolated. It's something that they can't control. So that is particularly difficult for them. And I have heard, in the interviews, participants say, we don't wear Pakistani clothes. We don't, we try to look different. One participant said to me, we tell people we are Indian, not Pakistani, because an Indian identity has a different connotation. Maybe you're working in a good job. Maybe, you've come here on a proper visa, So there's so many different levels at which psychologically they have to negotiate this thing of being isolated and being marginalized and trying to survive within that context. Okay, so lack of access to healthcare as well, unemployment. So these ones at the bottom are more common amongst urban refugees and asylum seekers who are in countries that have not signed the convention, that have not signed up to protecting people like this, all right? So oftentimes they can't work because they have no rights. They basically have no rights, no rights. No right to be employed, no safety because they're considered as illegal immigrants. They're not considered as people who need help. Forced movement. I heard from many of my participants how they had to move from apartment to apartment because there'll be a raid in a building nearby, then they'd move, or there'll be a raid in their building, they'd hide in the bathroom, and miraculously the immigration would go away, and then they'd have to pick up everything and move again. So there's a lot of forced movement from place to place to place to place, 6, 7, 8, 10 apartments in 2 years and things like that. And exploitation as well. One participant said to me, you know, when I was asking her, what is your position in Thai society? She said, well, for the authorities, we're a business. We're a business. Why? Because when they get stopped, police say, present your documents, and they can't, 50,000 baht, and we'll let you go. Right? They phone the community, they phone friends, they scrape the money together, they pay the money, they let them go. No IDC for you. Okay, the Immigration Detention Center. We can let you go. Just give us the 50,000 baht. So for authorities, it can be that they are made to be a business. And this was very common throughout my interviews. You know, many participants said, I mean, my sample size isn't big, but a lot of them said, yes, we've paid bribes before. We know people who've paid bribes to stay out of IDC. So they can be exploited. And also those who did do kind of, under the table work, cash in hand work, were paid like a lot less than a local person would be paid for doing the work. Although they did it gratefully, but they recognized that they were being exploited. And altogether, you know, all of this equals continuation of traumatic experience, you know, because all of these things that are here, I heard them also say about their experience in Pakistan while they were being persecuted. So it's kind of like they come from persecution and the experience continues in the country of asylum. So Pakistani urban refugees and asylum seekers. Now this, I haven't seen in the literature, okay? This is me. Pure us. It's just short because it's so long to keep writing it and writing it. So the majority of Pakistani urban refugees and asylum seekers who live in Bangkok are Christian. They have fled because of religious purposes. Now, some of them are from other religious sects, but a lot of them are Christian, including Seventh-day Adventists, of course. So why are they fleeing from Pakistan? Why are people from religious minorities fleeing from Pakistan? Well, in Pakistan's situation, it's a Muslim country, and only 4% are from other religious persuasions. You have the Christians, Shias, the Ahmadis, the Hindus, and the Sikhs. Not Muslim. Now, I won't give you, it's a long history of how the situation came to be the way it is today, where religious minorities are facing such violent persecution. But mainly in 1947, the year of independence, that was when the Muslim state was established. And this is where things became complicated for religious minorities. Then in the 1980s, things became even more terrible with the establishment of blasphemy laws, okay? And these were things like, clauses like, if you deface or if you discredit or belittle or anything the Holy Quran, then you can be subject to life imprisonment or death. Okay? So these are the kind of clauses. And also things like Sharia law became prominent and other such things, and a separate electorate for non-Muslims. Okay? So there was a lot of segregation. So this is when, it was in the 1980s, from 1980 to 1986, when things became very, very, very difficult. And Christians and other minorities were openly persecuted. I'm sure some of you have heard of kind of bombings of churches, shootings of Christians, burning down of villages and so on, where Christians live and so on. So this is where things are, and since then things have been very difficult for Christians, but Christians still do hold to their faith in Pakistan and have Christian communities and go to church and so on. Yes, okay. And also, so Christians, I just want to explain like the level of persecution that they face. Christians in particular I'll speak about. They are given like the worst positions in society, like they are not supposed to have like high-ranking jobs or anything like that. And so this is the kind of persecution. It's political, it's social persecution. Sometimes there are attempts to forcibly kind of make them into Muslims, under threat of death, which was a very common story amongst the participants that took part in this study. In fact, most times the narrative of them leaving Pakistan went something like this. I was working in a job, a good job. I was perhaps, leader of a certain section of the workforce. One day, I don't know, they will say, I'm trying to remember the stories, like one person said he rested a book on a table or something, and somebody said, oh, that's offensive to me. That's offensive because he rested it next to the Quran or something like that. Oh, that's offensive. You are being offensive to my religion. You are being offensive to my prophet. Next thing, the whole workforce was against him. They went to speak to the boss. They said to him he had to convert, otherwise they would kill him. And then the next moment, they fired at his house. They came with guns and fired at his house and threatened him. No, what happens first is that they go to the mosque, and it's announced that this person is worthy of death. Then they'll go to the house, they'll shoot at the house. Then in the darkness of night, they have to gather their things, leave everything, cars, bikes, everything, and run to the next city. They'll tell the network in the next city. They'll hunt them down. They'll come and threaten them. They have to move to another city, another 100 or 200 kilometers away. Then the network there would hear that they're worthy of death. Because when it's announced that somebody is worthy of death, it goes throughout the whole network. And to do anything in Pakistan, you have to show your identity. But once you're blacklisted and you show your identity, they'll know exactly who you are. And every story was like that. We moved and we moved and we moved and we moved. Then they started to attack my family. Then we said, you know what? We need to leave. We went to the church leaders and they said, you need to leave. We can't have anything to do with this stuff. That's how the narrative goes. So at that point, they're forced to leave. I even had one participant say that at the airport, they were waiting for them. They had to switch plans. They had to go to another city airport. They were waiting for them again. And then finally, they tried a third time and they got to leave. So these participants that I spoke to are not, they kept on saying to me, if we could go home, we would go home. But we cannot. We'll be killed. We'll be killed if we go home. They left their houses standing, their cars standing. These were people in good positions. They had big homes. Everything is standing. Everything is still there. So the aim of the research study was to investigate the psychological experiences of Pakistani urban refugees in Bangkok in light of Thailand's current practices in relation to refugees. In qualitative research, we can't look at the individual without looking at the context. So the context of the political context of Thailand is very important for us to understand what these individuals are experiencing. So the rationale for the project was that there is definitely a huge gap in the research literature at the moment. Not much research has been done on urban refugees, and certainly not much at all on Pakistani urban refugees and asylum seekers. Not much at all. So I'm looking to try and plug a small space in that gap. And also pressures from the international community. There's quite a lot of pressure because basically there's quite a lot of pressure on Thailand to make come recently. The international community have got wind of the problems that not only Pakistani but urban refugees and asylum seekers are facing in Thailand. And so there's been some publicity around that. And so it's caused some level of political pressure. And Thailand are responding to that. They are responding to that. There are those who know much more about this than I do. But I've heard that moves are being made, discussions are being had to try and change things. We don't know how things are going to change, but at least discussions are going on at the moment, which means that it's a good time for people to conduct research like this. Also, my own personal rationale is that I have a thing for marginalized communities. And so for me personally, it excites me to do this research and use qualitative methods to give a voice to people who otherwise do not really have a voice. So what has been the journey so far? First of all, this whole thing started with just some ideas and a couple of contacts. I had no intention of leaving the UK and thinking, yeah, when I get to Thailand, I'm going to do a piece of research on refugees. No. But when I first came, I remember going to lunch at somebody's house, and somebody mentioned something about refugees in Thailand. I was like, oh, okay, that's interesting. So marginalized group, so my antennas went up. Then I had a by-the-by conversation with somebody and said, do you know anyone who deals with refugees? I'm just interested in knowing. He said, yeah, I've got a couple of contacts. And I said, okay, I called one of those contacts and met her in Bangkok. She happened to, on that day I went to Bangkok, she took me to meet some Pakistani urban refugees and asylum seekers. And when I spoke to them, it was just like, yeah, I said to her, can we just collaborate and do some research on this issue? And so we did it. So it just started off by a series of coincidences. And I say that to say that I think everyone has an interesting research project in them or in their vicinity. It's just looking at things that you're interested in and conversations that you have with people and putting things together and thinking, oh, maybe this will work as a project, necessarily come from doing lots of reading or knowing loads about the area. I'm still learning about this area, but it's just an idea and a conversation and, and just an opportunity And it just so happened, thank God, that that same person was able to put me in touch with an organization who work with urban refugees and who visit them in their homes. So I was able to go to their homes and sit with them, talk with them, eat with them, and really be amongst them for as much as possible, so as much as I possibly could. So that was an interesting experience to go in. There's so much to say about that, going into their homes, seeing where they live. They're not just describing it to me. I'm looking around, seeing that they actually do live in a room like the space of from the window to here to back there. I'm actually seeing it for myself and seeing how their 2 adults and 3 children have to cope with that space. So when they tell me things in the interview, I'm seeing it visually because I've been there. And that is a really important thing about qualitative research, being there, wherever you possibly can. And then, of course, the methods developed from there. It obviously had to be qualitative research, not because I research, but because qualitative research is really good for work with marginalized groups. Yeah, because it gives them, like I said, it gives them a chance to have a voice, to explain in their own words without me telling them you need to tick that box and tick that box. Now, I'm not down on quantitative research at all. There's a place for quantitative research, but I find qualitative research to be useful with marginalized groups, especially who don't normally have a voice. Access. As I said, it was a blessing to meet this person who is my research assistant, and she was able to get me access into the homes it was actually through a church. They do community work bringing parcels of food to the refugees and asylum seekers, and so I went with them on delivery round and got to do my interviews then. And my research assistant also did interviews. I was also granted access by a second organization, which I wasn't anticipating at all. But they were kind enough to also give access to, so in the end, we wanted to have 12 interviews. In the end, there were 22. So it's doubled in size and doubled in length, I'm afraid. So, yeah, but it was good. Data collection, so I told you already that the data was collected in their homes. We did qualitative interviews, semi-structured interviews. So I had my list of set questions, but I didn't necessarily ask them in the same order or in the same way every time. And sometimes when a participant brought up a new issue, I would just follow along with what they wanted to talk about. So the questions I had were a guide, but they were not I didn't follow them strictly. All the questions in some way or the other were asked, but in different ways. And I also let the participants bring up their own issues and their own topics as well. And analysis. Analysis is something that I'm in the process of doing now. So I'm halfway through the analysis process. So I'm going to share with you some of the themes that have come up. So I'm sorry, I've realized my time is against me, but let's see how far we can go. So the participants were half and half, male and female, which I only realized today, actually. But yeah, half and half, male and female, age 20 to 73, but most of them were in the kind of 30 to 45 bracket. Mostly unemployed, obviously, but some of them did little kind of work on the side. One person was able to get work on a construction site. Obviously, that's illegal work, and it's dangerous work because he's traveling to and from work every day. He's exposed. Any inspector can come and check the site at any time, but yeah, out of desperation. So And most of them had been in Thailand between 6 and 8 years altogether. So 6 to 8 years living in the way that they do. So when it comes to analysis, typically I adopt this is one of my favorite theoretical standpoints, is constructionism. And constructionism basically suggests that each person constructs their own social reality. Each person constructs their own social reality. So when I look at a situation, it's not going to be the same as the way that Dr. Kung looks at a situation. Why? Because I have a different cultural background, I have a different upbringing, I have different experiences in life, I've been through different difficulties, I have a different family makeup. All of those things shape the way in which we see life and the way in which we interpret things. So we, in a sense, construct our own realities. Think about it. Even the way that I see God, my experience with God is not the same as your experience with God. You know, while I see God as somebody who I can completely and totally and utterly rely on, not having to worry about anything, you may think you have to help God. Do you understand? I'm not saying that you do, but we have different perspectives on it. Doesn't mean God is different. It means our perspectives are different. So basically, in a nutshell, that's what constructionism says. At the last line, each of us creates our own world from our perceptions of the actual world. The world is what it is, but we see it in different ways. So I basically wanted to learn how these people are constructing their experience and how they're constructing themselves in that experience. So many people ask that how do you like analyze like quantitative data? Like it's just a page of words. Like what do you do with it? It's just like this is my interview. It's just like that. Like what? Like what do you do with that? This is my interview transcript. You know, and what I found useful is to ask some key questions that helped me. Even now, the questions stuck on my wall, I still have to keep looking at them and looking back at the data and looking at them and looking back. And it helps me to dig deeper than just saying something like, oh, this person is sad. And if they describe going to the shop, went to the shop. Do you understand? That's just very surface level and descriptive. You know what the person is saying they did, but how are they describing going to the shop? What emotions are they expressing that's associated with going outside? Or what, how are they constructing themselves as a person that belongs to the community or as an outsider? Those kind of issues you won't get to if you just look at what they literally say. So there is an art and there is a skill and there is a mentality involved in being able to interpret this stuff. So these are some of the questions that I ask myself. What are people doing? What are they trying to accomplish? In describing to me, in giving me a lengthy description of their walk to the shops and back home, what are they really trying to tell me? How do they do this? What kind of words do they use? Do they use comparison? Are they comparing themselves with somebody else? What are they trying to tell me when they're describing somebody else then describing themselves? What are they trying to accomplish through what they say? How do they understand what's going on? What assumptions are they making? And this one is quite important. What is the broader significance of that instance or event? What is it a case of? All right? Is it a case of them justifying their actions? Is it a case of them trying to, I don't know, put somebody else in a certain position? What are they doing? What is it a case of? So we'll see that in a second in a couple of data pieces. So this was the process. First, it was verbatim transcription. That just means word by every precious word. Okay, so that took a long time. I think after the third interview, I started to regret it. I was like, what am I doing? What am I doing? And anyone who passed my apartment on a Sunday would have just heard, because I used to stand on a cupboard near the door and just, anyway, but yeah, that's over. Initial coding and memoing. So that's going through it in detail and putting all, I wish I could explain it all in detail, but coding is where you kind of interpret, you capture what the person is saying. You try to answer those questions and kind of annotate your transcription. And then that process, you do that again to just refine your codes. Sometimes you'll find that you've put two codes and rarely they're the same thing. The first wave of analysis, you don't pay attention to how many. You don't pay any attention. You just go through it, and whatever emerges from the data, you just put it down. You don't try to make it all neat and tidy. That's for the second round. That's for the second round. So it's a very open process. And then establishing the final themes, like refining a bit more, and then the write-up. So I'll just go through maybe one of these quickly, just to give you an example of data. I wish we could have done this together. But this is just to give you an example of one theme that's coming up in the data. And there are a number of themes. In fact, I'll show you that first. There are a number of themes that are coming up. Invisibility is a theme. People trying to be invisible in different ways. Trying to not look Pakistani is a form of invisibility. Trying to hide from authorities. Trying to cook food when the neighbors are out, because if the neighbors smell the food, then they might call the police because they don't like the smell. That was very, very common amongst my participants. Trying to keep the children quiet, don't make any noise, because the neighbors might not like it, then they're going to call immigration, then we're all going to go to IDC. So there is this forced invisibility. We are alive, but we must be as though we're dead. Identity conflict. There's so many different of identity conflict. I'll just give you one quick example. I've come from Pakistan. I've come from a good job. I was manager in my organization. Now I have to beg for food. Now I can't provide for my family. Now the things that my children are asking me for, I can't even give to them. I'm powerless. Okay? So there's identity conflict and dissonance between who they want to be, who they desire to be, and who they're forced to be in the moment. Isolation and marginalization, we talked a bit about that. Subhumanity, having to be less than human, that was another thing. And having to justify being human. Positioning of God. This was a big one. This is a big one because they're Christians. And I noticed that whatever was going on, God was always, it was always okay once they started to mention God. No matter what was happening, everything was made okay by, oh, but God will provide for us. God will lead us. God will do something for us always. Religious coping, making sense of a difficult situation through their religious beliefs. Survival and the cost of survival. For these people, the cost of survival was loss of humanity and loss of dignity. But it was what they needed to survive, begging and those kind of things. And relationships with Thai society. and waiting or placelessness, not having a place. No place in Pakistan, no place in Thailand, no place, placelessness. Waiting to find a place in a third country. So I'll just read one of these to close. And this particular quotation, is about making sense of the current situation, about religious coping in a way and making situation. So it says, before I came here to Thailand, I don't have any experience of the Bible. Even I'm not reading the Bible every day in Pakistan. Even I'm not doing the prayer as well in Pakistan. When I reach here in Thailand, after when I saw the circumstances, then I'm going to start my prayer. I read my Bible every day. I feel this kind of difference in myself. I have this kind of difference. Before that, I'm not believing God. Even someone talk with me, God will provide us. God will do that. I said, I don't believe that. I don't believe that. Who is God? I don't believe that. That time I'm talking like that. And now we are nothing without God. He makes a way for us, and I believe on him. We stay here. Maybe he has some special thing for us, or maybe he has some special plan for us. That's why we're here. Okay? So just like hearing that, just like in 2 seconds, like what would you make of that? And anyone got any thoughts of that? What that is about? I know everyone's like, it's Friday and our brains are dead. Our brains are dead or dying. Anyone got, just anyone, just any ideas? What would you maybe note in your margin? Okay, resolve. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Ah. Acceptance. Okay. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mm. That's a question that could come to our mind. And what I think to myself as well is, what is he trying to then say about his Thailand experience? Something happened here. What is he trying to say? What is he trying to tell me as the interviewer? What is he trying to tell me about his Thailand experience? Yeah, yeah. His Thailand experience has been really, really terrible. He's had financial difficulties, immigration difficulties, but yet he's trying to tell me that yeah, in all of this, there's a blessing, which means that I see this participant trying to make sense of his experience. And the spiritual part of his life helps him to make sense of this experience. It means it's not just a wasted time in Thailand, without a job, without a proper home, without his family, it's not just a wasted time. God makes it make sense. Do you understand what I mean? Now he doesn't say that. He doesn't say, "Oh, Amanda makes it all make sense," but it's a way of, you have to deduce what they're saying from what they've said. You know, one quote that I always remember is that qualitative research is about making the familiar strange and interesting. This is the familiar, what he said. He's just talking to me about his everyday experience. But when I interpret it and analyze it, it becomes strange and interesting. That's only done through interpretation and analysis. But there is so much to say about this one quote. There's so much to say about it. But one of the main things is this thing of participants grappling to make sense of this space, this limbo space, this time of where they haven't got, any home, they haven't got any rights, they haven't got any money, they haven't, this terrible kind of space waiting for something better, okay? That could just be seen as a waste time in their life. But when God is put into the picture, then it makes this time make sense. Oh, actually, this time is actually beneficial. Actually, maybe my life would be worse if I didn't have this time. It creates a whole different light on what they're doing here. So, yeah, so that's just one example. But in any case, it's a shame we can't go through more, but I'd like to end on I think one of the most pointed quotes that any of the participants ever said. One participant, Naveed, she said this: we will die once in Pakistan someday. If the Muslims will attack us, we will die once. But in Bangkok, we are dying every day. Every day. So thank you for listening. And I apologize that it wasn't more interactive than I planned it to be. But if you want to find out more about the research or anything that I'm doing, please feel free to contact me. I don't know if anyone has any quick questions. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Oh, from the research, yeah. Yeah, so far, I'm still in the middle of analysis, yeah. Research. Do you know something? In the studies that I've done, and in the literature review that I've done, I don't actually think there has been research done on urban Pakistani refugees in other countries. Yeah, specifically on Pakistani refugees. Urban refugees, yes, and these themes can relate to general urban refugee issues, yes. But if you're talking about Pakistani urban refugee issues, then I can't say. Yeah. It really is a very small area. The biggest one? At the moment? Oh, I would have to reach the end, because I'm in the middle of analysis right now. I would have to reach the end. I mean, I'll probably predict survival. That's a big issue. And a lot of these, they cross over. They are interrelated. But yeah, the cost of survival is a big issue. Yeah, and isolation and marginalization, I'll say, is another big one. But it's hard to say right now because they're not, I'm not completely finished. Yeah.
Since most of these people, or at least many of the people who came to Thailand seem to be educated, well-educated, my question would be, why would you fly to a country that you know does not accept refugees to be stuck, especially if you are somewhat learned, you would have at least found out, this is the place I should go.
Okay, there are two reasons. Number one, they didn't know. Because they had to make the decision very quickly, like literally overnight. They had to get somebody else to go and get their visas and go. But that's number one. That's number one. And they also knew that the UNHCR have an office in Thailand, in Bangkok. So that was their thing. Oh, the UNHCR are there. They have an office there. So that must be a place of safety. All right? Right now, but it is a good question. Right now, what's happened is that the number of Pakistani refugees coming here have lessened over time. Because now the word is out that actually this is not a good situation to be in. The second reason is because Thailand, to get a visa to come here, it's quick and it's easy and it's not expensive. That's the two reasons that all participants mentioned, like we have to get out of here in just like a couple of days. Okay, Thailand, quick, easy, get out, go, 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 go. Go, do what you have to do from there, but just go. Yeah. Does that? I mean, the majority, all of them. Huh? So the first month was fine. It was fine. They were good. But they could move freely, they could do whatever. And they just thought, I'm a teacher, surely I can get some teaching work. Surely maybe I can teach privately, I can do this, I can do that. I'm a qualified accountant, surely I can, So it's this, and plus they were advised by church leaders. And the stories are more or less almost the same. They were advised by church leaders, go to Thailand, go to Thailand. We sort you out with a visa and everything, go to Thailand, go to Thailand. So like I said, yeah, and remember, a lot of the countries around Pakistan are Muslim countries, so it would have discounted many places for a lot of them. So those who did come are now stuck. I mean, a few have been repatriated, and Canada seemed to be the most open country to take them, but it's a long process and it's very unpredictable. Yeah. Okay. In the interest of not worrying the saints, I think we will close up there, and just want to thank you all again for coming, and if you want to find out more, just please feel free to contact me.
Wow, that's open our eyes into other type of research and bringing us to different type of looking at people. Well, thank you so much, Dr. Amanda, that giving us a very new to me. I don't know about others, but it's very new to me. There are different kind of research, and if you have any more questions, which is very interesting research, which I'm gonna ask you more questions. And you guys, if you have more questions or the way how to analyze to come up with the key themes like this and further study, that would probably be able to identify which is the most important and the further benefit to these Pakistanis people in urban area in Bangkok. I think this research is very, very significant to the society in Thailand. Well, please give a round of applause to Dr. Amanda. We are going to have the next research seminar series in January, okay? The end of January. Yeah, Ajahn Nakorn from Humanity will give us the topic of research. Okay, before we dismiss, we would like to invite you to gather and to pray with us. Dr. Maxine, would you mind to please lead us in prayer?
Our Father in heaven, we are so thankful today that we find ourselves in a position that we are living freely, we are living with all of our needs being met, and yet sometimes we forget these blessings. We thank you for how we've been blessed, but our eyes have been opened and we are commissioned to meet the needs of those around us. So help us, Father God, to take away from this experience the resolve to always look for opportunities to help people who are less fortunate than ourselves. We thank you for this experience. We thank you that it's preparation day and we have Sabbath coming up. May all of our hearts be prepared for communion tomorrow. This is our prayer in Jesus' name. Amen.